Soil cubed agronomy. Really want to kind of explain why we came up with soil cubed. We had a problem. The problem was that we could produce really good sod, send it to a customer, and a lot of the time they were putting it on ground, dirt, soil that was, to be frank, horrible. The southeast is a great place to live. We have wonderful sunshine and things like that and good temperatures, but the problem is our soils are not that great. Um, Most of the soils in the southeast are either in the Piedmont hard clays that are about like a parking lot, or in the coastal plain that are sandy and have very little nutrient value. So after a lot of thought, we decided, well, we need an amendment, a really good amendment, and the best amendment we could come up with would be really good compost. Well, we searched high and low and looked at literally hundreds of samples of compost from all over the southeast and found none that we thought were really worthwhile. So we decided, let's make our own, and that's what we did with Soil Cubed. Now, the main question I want to talk about in the beginning of this presentation is, why can the Midwest Corn Belt grow corn so much better than we can, so much better than the rest of the world? And the real simple answer is they have an unbelievable amount of organic matter. The Great Plains soils are some of the highest in organic matter anywhere in the world. It's cold in the winter, so the organic matter doesn't break down. But in the southeast here, because of our cultivation history, because of years and years and years of cotton, everywhere in the southeast, even in the Piedmont, and because of our temperatures, we're warm during the winter, so the soil microbial activity goes on year round. And because of erosion, we have very little organic matter natural in our soils, and it can be even exacerbated in places where development is going on, because 9 times out of 10, the original developer scraped off whatever topsoil there was and sold it off. So we're dealing with B horizon subsoils that are, to be real frank, they're just horrible. But if you add organic matter, we can fix that. And organic matter is the key of why Midwestern soils are so great. Have you ever wondered how things grew before mankind really started commercializing chemical fertilizers in the 1940s? Chemical fertilizers basically took off during that time period because we built giant bomb manufacturing plants for World War II, and after those were closed, we converted almost all of those into fertilizer factories. Nitrogen is actually the main component in bombs, believe it or not. Well, how did things grow before commercial fertilizer? Well, they grew with the nitrogen cycle. That's how the good Lord intended. Before the 1940s, there were some fertilizers out there, mainly bat guano, some other stuff, but people depended on the nitrogen cycle. They fed cows, the cows the corn, they took the corn manure, put it back on the cornfields. And believe it or not, the Great Plains are a great example of, for years, for thousands of years, the plains were covered in grasses, and those grasses, as they broke down, grew more. They all grew without fertilizer. Today we get to thinking that you have to put down chemical fertilizers to make grass grow. No, you don't. If you have your soil in good shape, you don't even really need fertilizer. It's because we've ended up in this strange place where synthetic fertilizer is a panacea, and that's the only way we think of. If your soil's healthy, if it's doing what it's supposed to, if it's got great organic matter, you don't need a ton of synthetic fertilizer. The ground will produce its own. Okay, you probably remember a slide or something very close to this in probably your 5th or 6th grade science class. You were taught this, but we all tend to forget it. This is the natural way that nitrogen is recycled on Earth. Basically, plants and animals grow, they die, they are broken down by decomposers. There's other bacteria in our soil including the decomposers, nitrogen fixing bacteria, nitrifying bacteria. It's all broken down to a point where the plants can pick it back up, use it again, feed the animals die or waste is expelled, plants die, decomposed again. It's basically the circle of life. This is how the good Lord intended things to happen. It's only since mankind has basically learned to game the system, if you will, by adding nitrogen, synthetic nitrogens that are synthesized from the air, that we've learned to cheat this to use soluble fertilizers. It doesn't have to happen that way, and it's not the way nature and the good Lord intended it to be. This is just real simple, natural way for things to happen. And what we're doing with Soil Cubed is we're basically recharging that lost battery. Like I told you before, the Southeast, because of cultivation history or having topsoil removed and our temperatures, we've lost that natural bank of organic matter in our soils that really are the engine. They're the fuel that fuel all that microbial activity that breaks it back down into fertilizer for the plants to take up in a soluble form, and those plants grow and keep going. So all we're doing is really just recharging that system that mankind has probably screwed up over the years because of cultivation history. Now, not all organic matter is created equal. This dead possum, for instance, you could throw that dead possum on your yard, and probably in about a year and a half, the spot where the dead possum was, if you could stand the smell that long, would turn green and start growing, because in about that amount of time, the possum would break down. Well, what we're doing with Soil Cubed is giving you organic matter that is already broken down to this furthest part. It is humus. No, I'm just kidding. It's humus. There's always, people get them confused a lot. There's just one extra M. It's humus compost and not hummus. This is a plate of hummus. I love hummus. Hummus is great, but you wouldn't want to eat humus. Humus simply is organic matter broken down to its smallest particle. It takes a lot to do this. I mean, over in a natural situation under a tree, an oak tree for instance, it may take literally years and years and years for those leaves to break down to the point where they're humus again. But through our system, through a special process of inoculation, of aerobic, we're using an aerobic composting process, and inoculate them with the right beneficial organisms, keeping the temperature, the heat, the moisture right, we're able to speed up the process greatly and make that organic matter, our inputs, into humus very quickly. Now, this is a quick way to show whether or not you're buying a really well decomposed organic matter source. Take some, put it in 2 bottles if you have 2 samples, shake them up, and you'll see humus is colloidal, which means it stays in suspension in water. On the left, you'll see our Soil Cubed. You can see how the water is dark, murky. It's not much separation at all. This is after about 5 minutes they're shaken up. This is on the right, one of our competitions, and you can see the water's clearing out almost immediately. There's a lot of stuff floating. There's a lot of stuff on the bottom. It did not go into suspension at all. Now, is this mulch or compost? Well, a lot of what gets sold in the Southeast, unfortunately, probably in my definition is more mulch than it is compost. Yes, this probably has some been through some decomposition process, but almost, I guarantee you, this is probably anaerobic, big giant piles that they just piled up and let rot over a year or so. And it's not really breaking it down. This is not what would happen in nature. In nature, almost all of it that happens on the surface of the soil is aerobic with the good beneficial microbes. If you go into anaerobic conditions, the microbes aren't nearly as beneficial at all. But unfortunately, You know, I have a lot of people say, well, I could buy compost a whole lot cheaper. Yeah, you can. But the problem is, if you buy bad compost, it's worse than putting no compost on at all. The reason why is this still has a lot of decomposition to happen. So if you put this in your soil, what's going to happen is all those microbes are going to be tied up trying to break this stuff down into a plant, into a form a plant could use. While if you put on soil cubed, it's ready to go. Still need the microbial activity, but you're feeding those microbes stuff that they can use immediately. If you spread some material that looks like this, it'll actually tie up the nitrogen in your soil, and your plants will look nitrogen deficient because this is not fully compost. Like I say, this is, I won't tell you who, but this is one of the major southeast sources of compost. To give you a little reference, this is what ours looks like. This is soil cube. You easily tell the difference. Breaking down, ours looks like fine coffee grounds, even finer than that. Easily spread through a fertilizer spreader. Smells great. None of the big chunky sticky looking stuff, because we just don't use inputs that would cause that at all. Now let's talk a little bit about what good compost, what soil cube can do for your soil. It'll increase the CEC, the cation exchange capacity, which is basically, think of it like Velcro. It's the ability of your soil to hang on to nutrients and to release them when plants need them. It makes your soil where things don't pass through as easily, where if you had a big rain, you'd lose most of your nutrients. This really just pushes them, just holds them. When the plant needs them, it releases them. Increases water holding capacity by at least 4x. Provides natural nutrients. We've been talking about that before. Provides beneficial soil organisms, and it provides natural disease suppression. Now, beneficial soil organisms. Let's talk a little bit about more of that. These are some of the good beneficial soil organisms that we inoculate our compost with. Non-symbiotic nitrogen-fixing bacteria. There's also symbiotic that we don't do. That's what a legume plant, a bean plant will do. It has, actually, they live in the plant roots. This is non-symbiotic, so it lives in the soil, eats organic matter, synthesizes nitrogen from the air, and gives it back to the plant. Mycorrhizae, which is a really interesting, you can spend a whole presentation, I won't here, but it actually increases the roots of a plant's ability to pick up nutrients and water. See, myocetes, that's the stuff that really makes soil smell like dirt. You know, if you drive by a good, freshly plowed field and you have that earth smell, it's not the earth itself. It's this acetinomycetes that actually give off that, and they're beneficial in the whole cycle also. Good decomposers, stuff that will actually break down that organic matter, break down your thatch in a turf situation, and keep the whole process going very healthy. All that is we inoculate soil cubed with every time. Disease suppression. Let's talk a little bit about that. There's a good UGA study coming out. They've got 1 year data. They'll be doing the second year of data pretty quick. It shows that it reduces dollar spot really, really well. A good application of compost. And how does this happen? Mainly, most disease causing fungi are just naturally occurring decomposers. They're naturally occurring, for instance, Rhizoctonia, always in the soil, but they only attack live plants when it's abnormal conditions, wet, hot, humid, other different conditions that'll actually cause them to grow out of that natural state and actually attack live plants. So if there's plenty of good organic matter, basically in the soil, then it'll keep the decomposers busy. It'll keep that Rhizoctonia breaking that stuff down. It doesn't really want to attack live tissue. It only does that under certain conditions. So it really helps maintain that balance in your soil. But like I said, really the main benefit is recharging that natural energy battery. Putting that organic matter in there, keeping those microbes busy, providing good healthy microbes. It's just the way nature intended for soil to work. The problem is, because of mankind's actions over the years, our soils don't work that well anymore. So we have to go back and replace that. And this is a great way to do it. Let me just show you a couple of amazing results. We had several pecan orchards where we've placed a 5-gallon bucket of soil cubed in the hole as we were planting trees. We had one instance in Fort Valley. We did that, had zero death, zero mortality of those young trees. Neighbor right down the street planted at the same time. Over half his orchard died in the same year. It was in a dry year. Really does a great job with that. This football field looks great now. When we got it, it was about 50% coverage, if that. Probably more like 20% coverage. You had to look in between patches of bare dirt to actually see grass. Applied 2 applications of compost. By the end of the season, it looked like Sanford Stadium. It was great, and everybody was just tickled. We've done 4 seasons worth of raised bed gardening with no additional fertilizer, no soluble fertilizer added at all. And the most amazing thing is I love selling this product because I've literally every person I sell it to calls me back the next year and wants more of it. It is just a great product, and it does such an amazing thing with our soils. Just a couple of other things kind of thrown in there, bonuses. If you run the fertilizer value on this, compare it to soluble fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer, this stuff, the fertilizer value you get in a full cubic yard bag of soil cubed is very comparable. It's actually cheaper than almost all soluble fertilizer if you went and bought the same comparable amount of nutrients in 35-pound bags at Lowe's and Home Depot. This stuff's cheaper, and it's natural. We're OMRI listed, which means it's fully certified for organic gardening. Just the way to go. So it really is cheaper. You're getting a lot of fertilizer value in a cubic yard bag of soil cube. Phosphorus. Just want to throw this in there. The world supply of phosphorus in the NPK of fertilizer. This is the P. The world supply of phosphorus are running extremely low. There's some pundits that say we only have about an 80-year supply left. We get a lot of talk about fossil fuels running out. We don't talk about this much. We should be talking about this probably more than we should fossil fuels, because it looks like we have less of this. Plants have to have it. There's many countries, for instance China, that have already banned the export so they can keep for themselves the rest of their phosphorus reserves. And the phosphorus worldwide reserves that are left are in not so fun places like Morocco and other not so stable countries. So we need to do the right thing and manage phosphorus. And what we're doing with our process is we're taking it out of those inputs, putting it back in the ground so the ground can be extremely productive, instead of just go and buy more and deplete natural phosphorus reserves even more. Just want to show you a picture of our facility. This is a little wet, but it shows you how we do it. Windrows we have across the street, can't see in this picture, but even more. We've got plenty of this product. I guarantee if you try it, you'll fall in love with it. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for listening.